Good evening and welcome to this week's episode of Sunday Night Live, your favorite automotive show where we tackle all the issues, whether it's the front of the store, the back of the store, or somewhere in the middle. I bring on the experts every week to share with you what they do or what they've done to help dealers become more efficient, more profitable, and improve the customer experience at your stores. Real actionable information that you can use tomorrow. And this week, I have my good friend and colleague, Adam Dennis. Adam, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks, Paul. Great to be here.
So before we get started, for the few folks that may or may not have heard your name before, why don't you give us a little bit of background on what you are or what you've done to get to this point, and then we'll just jump right in.
Yeah, I'm an old man. You can see by the gray hair.
Any hair's good here.
Yeah, it's good that I still have some. But no, I've been in the industry since 2000. I had a company back in the early 2000s, which I was one of the early companies that came forward with website solutions for dealers. And that was an entertaining time because talking to a dealer about a website or any type, putting their inventory online, they were like, I do the newspaper. Why do I need to do what you're talking about? But I did that. And then I worked for many years with a large enterprise group in the automotive space. And then a number of years back, I started a company called SurgeMetric, which originally was doing website work, but we expanded to offer Hispanic marketing. And then from there, we expanded to offer basically a digital marketing solution for targeting and analyzing the environment around a dealership for identifying opportunities with Hispanic marketing. And now we're rolling out AI solution too to work with our Hispanic marketing offering. So that's me.
Awesome. Well, you and we first met when I was with Dominion.
Yep.
And that was
a long time ago.
2012? Yeah.
No, 2012. It would be like 10.
Well, I started, I think 2012 with them.
Oh, really? Then I guess it was 2012.
Yeah. So great stuff, man. It's so interesting. There are so many opportunities, right? Every day, whatever you want to talk about, there's an opportunity there that's untapped. And, you specializing in marketing to the Hispanic community, that's huge, man. I Googled this and I come up with $2.5 trillion worth of buying power.
Yep.
That's a lot of money. That's a lot of opportunity that for the most part, dealers are not taking advantage of. I see every day. Now, I'm not saying all dealers because there are some that do a good job with it. But for the most part, from going into hundreds of dealerships, I don't see a lot of people focusing on this. So we're going to run through an outline that you and I talked about earlier that should give a lot of information to dealers on, what the opportunity is and a little bit on how to get started with it. So talk to us about where did this start? Give us like a quick history on this.
On what I'm doing or just in general Hispanic marketing?
In general, Hispanic marketing.
Okay. Well, I think, when you and I talked about the outline, I threw in something I don't usually talk about in a focused way, but I decided to do it simply because I say it a lot. And that is so many of the different cultural groups that have come to the United States have come in. And when they first arrive, a lot of times they weren't really accepted. Right.
Yeah.
And you had a conflict between the dominant cultural group and then whatever the subgroup was. And one of the best examples are the Irish, right? Because I'm part Irish. And if you look at the history of the Irish, for example, in Baltimore, during the turn of the century, there were ads in any newspaper for work, and it would say, no Irish nor N-words need apply. It would be that blunt about where they were seen in their position in the society.
Yeah.
But as the numbers grew and as their spending power grew and the middle class grew, that changed, right? And none of that would be seen today at all. So I think what we're seeing here with the Hispanic community, and this is what drew me in, I saw the change demographically because we wrote some tooling that we used to analyze demographics. And we're like, oh, wow, I was going to say, oh, damn. Just the numbers were incredible. And particularly, it wasn't just in the stereotypical areas like Texas or or down in Florida or the Southwest or whatever. It was in sometimes small towns where you have high numbers.
Yeah.
And so for me, I recognize that there was changes. And so what's funny is you say 2.5 trillion as of this year. You go back 5 years ago, it was around 1.7 trillion. So think about what that represents in terms of growth, so especially during COVID as an intervening period. So what you're having is an explosion in the Hispanic community where you're having a building middle class. You're having the same process that happened with other cultural groups, other ethnic groups that came to the United States, where they come in new, they matriculate, and then you get this explosion of a middle class. And that's what we're seeing. If you were to take that group and break them way as their own country, they'd be somewhere around the 8th largest economy in the world. So that's a lot of spending. Wow. Yeah.
That's stupid money.
It is. And you're crazy if you're a dealer not to look at and I would say this for any business period, but to look at your community and say, what's the makeup of that community, right? What's the composition? You can get that information easily. Like anybody here, if they wanted to know about their dealership, they could drop me a message and I'll run data for them in a snap and give them not just what's the population, but what's the subcultures that make up that population. Because the thing is that the mistake you can make if you look at the Hispanic community as this monolithic creature, that's a big mess. Gigantic. Because your Cuban Americans have a different cultural history than your Mexican Americans, right? And so if you can show this understanding of the subtle differences based upon the composition of your area, that's a way of saying, I talk your language. Not just I talk your language in terms of Spanish, I talk your language in terms of understanding your culture. The same way if I lived in Boston, which is kind of where I came from, you know how to talk the language of the Irish community because that's a dominant community in the area. And if you market and forget about St. Patty's Day, you're an idiot, right? If you're a dealer. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So basically, when we look at a community, when a dealer talks to us, the first thing we do is break down what is their surrounding area like in terms of the composition,
what's
the population numbers, what's the generational numbers? Because, for example, if you look at a place like Texas, you have multiple generations. So you have a segment of that population. If you go talking to them in Spanish, they're not going to pay attention to you necessarily, right? So, but if you go talking to them in terms of their cultural history and you do things that recognize their cultural history, then great. And the thing is so often do we assume cultural understanding that we might have if you're depending on whatever your cultural history is, where you're from. Again, let's go back to the Irish, and if you're in Boston, you're just assuming all that crap because it's part of how you grew up, right? But if you're in an area where the population is changing, and when you go reach out to the Hispanic community, you're showing, hey, I understand who you are, where you come from, what's important to you. Everybody knows in marketing, that's one of the first rules. That's the first connection, right? So it's not rocket science that we do. It's just understanding that you have to take time to understand who you're talking to and talk to them in a way where, they're going to listen.
Hey, I want to follow up on that, but let me get to a couple of comments here. Robert Allen Carvel joins the show, says, great topic. Thank you. Michael Dean Offmuth, good evening, guys. And my brother from another mother, Paul Machine. By 2040, the Latino market will displace all other minority classes combined.
He's right.
That's huge. Dan Stockel, a big shout out to Paul and Adam. Adam is changing the view of the industry. Love it. Paul Machine says, great convo, guys. Yo soy cubano de primero generación.
Lord.
You need to know a little bit about a lot of things. That's what my dad taught me a long time ago. So to follow up on that, somebody contacts you, a company contacts you, and now you can then segment a particular geographical area, not just by Latino market, but which versions of Latino market, as well as generations. Now, what I learned just got back from doing a few hiring and retention workshops. All right. And what's interesting is that we've got 5 different generations across our industry right now. I think this might be the first time ever. And each generation has different values insofar as different things that they find important to them. So to your point earlier, to reach out to someone and not communicate to them in the way that their preferred communication style is, then that's not really doing you any justice at all. You haven't gained anything. As a matter of fact, you're probably doing more harm than good because you're showing that you have no clue what's important to these people.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, again, it's treating people like people, right? Taking the time to learn.
Yeah.
If you meet a new friend, if you're a person that's reasonable, you try to learn about them, right? You try to learn who they are, what do they value? You make those connections. And really the way we approach everything is all about making the connections. What we say every time we talk to a new dealer, we say, it's not about talking the language, it's about talking to the culture, right? Language is just a piece of that culture. Yeah. So again, as I always put out, it's not rocket science. It's sort of opening your mind differently. And then it's also looking at it from the point of view is don't treat the community as, hey, you're my new gold source at the end of the rainbow. If you legitimately seek to build a relationship with that community, if you legitimately seek to establish yourself as a dealer who has connections to the community, then that will answer its own story for you. It's like when you and I, before we came on the air right now, we're talking about the importance of reviews. And if you're selling to the Hispanic community and so you just sold somebody a car, ask them to give you a review in Spanish. Because
Tip number one. Takeaway number one.
Yeah, it's a validator, right? Because you're having somebody of the culture that somebody else you're trying to talk to is from saying, these are good people. And that's ultimately what it comes down to, right? It comes down to when you're doing a sale.
Yeah.
And if you create a sale that's long lasting, in other words, a repeat customer type sale,
that's the goal.
Then someone's made a connection to you that you're a good person and this is who I want to do business with. And if you look at the stats, the Hispanic community is largely ignored by a lot of marketing these days. And so as a consequence, if you're the first dealer that steps out and builds that relationships and shows respect to the community, then you're going to be the one who benefits from that. The other people that ignore the community, there's a reason why Toyota does well with the Hispanic community is because for years now, they've been marketing to the community and showing respect. They consistently score tossed across the top. And we do each year a car buyer survey. It'll be coming out soon. We're hoping to get it done by Hispanic Heritage Month, which is coming up.
Next month, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, it starts mid this month and goes next month. But the point is that what we found is just this consistent story about just show respect, just connect. It's again, I constantly say it's not rocket science.
Let me get to a couple of comments. Let's see here. Dan Stockel says 100% true. Mark Rodriguez says the Spanish market has the highest percentage of eye rollers per capita. Oh, that's an inside joke there. Mark.
There are a couple of people I said today, please come on and heckle me. So because I have this very distorted sense of humor, as you know all too well.
Oh yeah.
Hopefully he'll be one of the first that gives me a hard time.
And Paul Machine says, great accent, Paulie. Thank you. And Dan Stockel says, and the most loyal group of people. Adam and I can't wait to meet up with you, Richard Ward.
Oh, I know Richard.
So yeah, no, it's such an incredible opportunity. And to your point, Mark, es verdad. Or no, es verdad. So to your point, to leave the review in Spanish, but they could also leave the review in Spanish and English, no?
Yep. It's not, again, what happens to some people is they get this notion, okay, we got to do all in Spanish and all in English. And no, particularly in areas where you have multi-generational, no. You can mix it up and that's fine. If you try too hard, it shows, right? So yeah, there's a balance. There's always a balance.
So,
but let me talk a little bit to like the survey we do each year.
Yeah.
To car buyers. What's interesting about that is we found some very clear patterns, right? Like in terms of brands that do well, Toyota, Toyota, Toyota. It's usually, it's always at the first. And then there's sort of a fight going between Ford, Chevy, Honda, and Nissan for the second, third, fourth, fifth slots, right? They go up and down. When you look at Toyota, what it's done over the years is it's focused really hard on just building a good reputation with the community, not just marketing, but being seen as a friendly corporation to the community, right? And so that has a translation value in my view, that why we see when we do our car buyer survey, when people talk about brands that are positive to them, it's that. The other thing that's interesting though is women and men are different, right? You see, like in our survey data, a woman is much more likely to refer a dealer that basically communicates them in Spanish to another individual. That's another thing for dealers, referrals. How do you promote referrals, right? So when you start knowing data like that women behave differently, right? That they have some different sort of values as how they see things, that should influence also in terms of how you market, right? And the other thing is when it comes to traveling further, like, so for example, again, a dealer that would be marketing to the Hispanic community in Spanish and in a culturally sensitive way, women are like 100% of the women in our surveys consistently year after year, you get a little tiny wiggle, are saying, I will drive that far, that extra distance to go to a dealer that will treat me right, as opposed to men who lag behind somewhere around 74%. We'll say they do that. 70, in that up and down spot. But I think what's important there too is, again, I like to reinforce the notion, don't look at it as a monolithic community. Look at it as a community has many layers, generational layers, by gender, by age. So as you develop your relationship, look for those different things. And then from the point of view of marketing, see how you can capitalize on it, because we all know that different brands have different sort of levels of vehicles that appeal to different age groups and different, genders and stuff like that. Think about that as your marketing as well.
Now, interesting that what you mentioned about Toyota, and oftentimes people have similar beliefs and similar practices, but don't necessarily know about what the others are doing, even though they may be doing the same thing. And where I'm going with that is, when it comes to marketing, okay, I'm a huge believer in build your community, leverage that community, value that community, and the byproduct of that is that they buy your products and services, all of them, and they will come to you from great distances to do so. I never put two and two together that's also Toyota's philosophy, and maybe part of the reason why they do so well with this community.
Yeah, and let me give you a little example. There's a dealer that I just adore that works with us. They're out of Myrtle Beach, and when they originally approached us, I was like, I don't think I can help you, because the population out to 50 miles was only 30,000 Hispanics, right? And usually we look at a higher number as a good starting point, but they were pretty driven. And so we worked with them. If you knew the owner is this very Southern gentleman. He's very Southern, right down to the accent and everything else. But what he's done is he's shown such an affection for the community that at this point now, almost all of his buyers are from the Hispanic community. He will have people drive 2 to 3 hours just to buy from him, right? And every Christmas they do this big thing where they invite all their customers in, and it's again, most of their customers are Hispanic, so and certainly around the holidays that's a really important time, and so he honors them. He does other nice things for them through the year, and as a consequence, he's built this really powerful relationship that while other dealers are struggling, and he's a small dealer, he's not a big dealer by any means, but he has problems keeping cars on his lot. Yeah, he has problems keeping cars on his lot, where other dealers I talk to have problems getting cars off their lot. But it's also, he looked at the community differently. He wasn't looking, I'm going to start marketing and I need to see results tomorrow.
Thank you.
He took a long view. He's like, I'm going to start marketing and I'm going to build a relationship. And now a number of years later, he's fine while other dealers in the area are really struggling.
Marketing is a long game. It's not,
Yeah.
let me put the seed in the ground, let me put some water on it, and we're going to have flowers tomorrow. That's not marketing. That's wishful thinking.
Yeah.
But marketing is a long game. Let me get to a couple of comments. Dan Stockel says, Ann Fleming, hers has the tools and data about women and their buying habits. I would recommend that you both speak with her. Are you connected with her?
That'd be
or no?
nice. I know the name.
Okay.
And that might mean I've talked with her before, but my brain doesn't work so well anymore.
Let's connect with her then. And Paul Machine says the Latin communities value faith, family, country, and are mostly likely to have large multi-generational homes. They take care of their elders and their young.
Yeah, let me talk to that. So Paul, I love you. That's a really, really good point. So there's Daniel Chu runs Tricolor Auto Group out in the Southwest. And I admire this guy. He's really smart. What he's done is he's markets heavily to the Hispanic community. Unfortunately, he's not a customer. But the point is, he's really smart. And one of the things that he's realized is what Paul just said, which is you end up in situations often with houses where there's multiple generations. So when a car is purchased, it's often not just seen as the responsibility of the individual who purchased, it's the responsibility of the family, right? And so one of the things I have an article that's going to be coming out soon, but it's been a pain in the butt to try to get data on, which is I've had this said to me so many times anecdotally that a family will take the responsibility for the car. So I've drawn the logical conclusion, which is the default rates for the Hispanic community should be on average equal to or better than the general population within certain groups. And so far, I've been able to find data on that to say all things held, all things held on, what's the expression? There's a legal expression that basically says all things considered, they actually do better. And what the all things considered refers to, which is the other side, which is often that community is presented with a lot of predatory loans. So when you take the predatory loans out of the equation, then yes, they do perform better. And it's not surprising because again, if they're more communal and they own the responsibility of that car from a communal perspective, then you're going to have less default rates, which then from someone looking at it from the point of view of, buy here, pay here, or anybody who is running their own financing, not a bad idea.
Now, I don't know. Paul has a lot of data. Are you connected with Paul Machine?
No, but you referred him to me the other day and I hadn't contacted him yet.
Okay. So yeah,
Hi, Paul. I'm going to call you.
Machine. I'll send you his number. All right. I'll text you his number because he's got a lot of data. I don't know if he has this specific data that you're looking for, but I know this guy's a data wizard and we have geek talk with regularity.
No, I mean, yeah, we're data freaks too. I mean, we love data. This piece of data has been hard to get for a variety of reasons, but it's really valuable because it gets to how some people look at the community as strictly a subprime proposition.
What a shame.
And I don't believe that's accurate. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a real shame. So what are some of the how does somebody get started with kicking off a program like this?
Yeah, I think the first thing, talk to somebody like me as a conversation, right? Whether it's us or somebody else, you got to kind of start and figure out, okay, what does my community look like around me? What's the composition? And what I mean by that is, is it predominantly of Mexican origin? Is it predominantly of Puerto Rican origin? What is that composition? And then also, can we get a generational understanding? Can we also get, any income information? So we get a picture from the point of view, a good marketing position of, what am I looking at? So that's the first thing is coming to know the community and what opportunities might exist there and how it's best that you might approach the community. And when you do that, then you're starting to think in terms of nuance, right? So for example, if you're a Mexican origin, troca is a common term for truck as opposed to camion, right? So what that tells you, if you have a community that has a high number of people of Mexican origin, you might want to use the word troca when you refer to truck periodically to show that cultural familiarity.
Yeah.
If you have someone of Puerto Rican descent, then it's a different term than camion. It's guagua. So you have these different things that you need to be sensitive to. So that's why understanding community, then that tells you, I'm talking with my hands tonight, I'm really sorry. So it then tells you, how do you nuance your message, right? So you want to get that down. Once you have that, then you got to think about, how do I prep my team? So if your team hasn't done any of this work before, you're now saying, okay, I'm going to go from single language selling and marketing to bilingual selling and marketing. What does that mean for how I approach everything? You got to think about, okay, what happens when someone walks onto the floor? How do I handle that? It is not good to be really obvious and call out and say, hey, send so-and-so up here. We have somebody who speaks Spanish. You got to think that stuff through, right? Because that's a little insulting.
I could see that happening, though. I swear to God, I could see that happening tomorrow in a store somewhere.
I know someone who's done it. So that's why I say it. So the point is that you want to prep your team to understand, okay, how are we going to walk through that sales funnel, the sales process, to handle everything well? What am I going to do with my transactional docs? I got to translate that stuff into Spanish, because you want to mitigate risk. You want a happy customer and they speak Spanish, give them Spanish. If they're bilingual, no problem. You can give them English docs, but you got to have the Spanish docs for those people who don't. You also need to understand the law in your area, what's allowed, what's not allowed, right? Yeah. So you kind of have to walk through those steps. And then you have to look at, okay, as I carry through a sale process and getting to the point we covered earlier, when you come out the other end, how do I promote reviews? In Spanish, how do I promote referrals?
Yeah.
So that, again, getting to Paul's point, the Hispanic community is very, very loyal when they're treated well. That is gigantic. Having that type of cultural bias is really valuable to you as a customer, because it gives you an opportunity for a community that you can convert with. Because when you treat them well, they're going to go on and say to a relative or a friend, or, hey, go to these guys. They're good. And one of the ways I put it is like, imagine if you were a foreigner or an American living in a foreign country. Let's say you're an American living in Costa Rica.
Yeah.
And you're in a place with a bunch of other expats, because it's not uncommon that when you get expats together in a place, they come together and they talk. Well, if you're buying a car and you find out from another expat, go to this place because they'll treat you well, what are you going to do? It's not rocket science again. Yeah, you're going to go to that place. So you got to think about all these steps, the review process, pushing that, the referral process. And then you also have to be willing to experiment outside of that narrow margin of, what things can I do to connect with the community? Are there community centers that I might be able to support? Are there, is there a church in the area that I might be able to support? What is it, if you have a bunch of Dominicans around, is there a baseball team I can support? Because Dominicans play baseball. People of Mexican origin play soccer. So you got to think about, that's the cultural sensitivity you need to think about. And it doesn't mean you're being manipulative. It means that
you're being smart.
Yeah, you're showing respect. So
I'm going to take it one step further.
You said you're going to take it one step further?
Yeah. This is an area where dealers aren't even, their head's not even in that part of the game. Okay. We always talk about, we have trouble finding people, right? So here's yet another demographic that's a ripe source for hiring. If we know what our market is, and we know where our market lives, where our market has social functions, if we know all this data, then we can proactively go after this market from a recruiting standpoint to really have a truer representation of our communities that we're not doing now. I don't care who the dealership is. No, I don't think they're doing it.
Yeah, not to cause problems. You can shut me off if I say this, but I say it because it's relevant, right? The average demographic that owns a dealership is what? It's a white guy between the ages of 45 and 65, roughly, give or take, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of that community, if you're looking at that demographic, depending on where they are and what their experiences are, their exposure to the changes in the environment around them is limited. And that's not a bad thing or a good thing. It's just a thing.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah, it just is, because if you're not exposed to all the changes going on around you because you're hanging out with mostly people like you, then
Yeah.
you're not going to see the opportunity. So all I say when I talk to dealers is like, look, let me help you understand what the opportunity is, and you make the decision what you're going to do. Right. So I think just sort of carrying on, you're asking me also what else do you do, is I also talk about prepping your tech, meaning you got to look at, if you have a website, have that website in Spanish and English, but don't just, depending on the nature of your community around you,
Yeah.
you don't want to just have Google Translate as your Spanish version. Now that's better than nothing, no doubt.
Sure.
Won't take that away. But if you have a community that's a community with a bunch of new arrivals, for example, you might have a conversation that you might want to have about what is a proper ID for buying a car. So that means that your Spanish language version of the website might have a slightly different conversation than your English language version of the website, right?
Yeah.
So you got to think that through. If you're looking at things from a point of view of your CRM and any of the automated messaging that goes out, address that too.
Yeah.
If you want to look at it from social media, you want to have a mixed story that you tell through social media. And bringing Paul back in, because Paul, I like you and I don't know you, making the point about loyalty, family, themes like that are really, really important to the community. And so as a consequence, you want to tell that story in your social media. And if you tell it in English, great. If you tell it, you want to also tell it in Spanish, no doubt. So you want to say all those things. And then if you have any type of chat tools, having a chat tool, particularly if you have anybody who has, if you have a dealership that has limited Spanish capacity, Spanish speaking capacity, then having a chat tool that can translate is at least a good start, right? So when you look at the, how do you kickstart? It's going through those steps. Understand what the community looks like. Figure out how you're going to nuance your message. Take a look at what you need to do to basically prep your team so they can handle bilingual sales. What you can do to set out whatever your technological infrastructure is so it's properly configured. And then after that, it's just learn and repeat. Don't be so dedicated. I always like to say that perfection is the enemy of good. You just need to be good here. You don't have to be perfect. Just be good and then learn and get better as you go.
Now, to your point about the website, all right. Yes, having Google Translate is better than not having anything at all, but it's still not ideal because let's face it, the sentence structure in English is different than a sentence structure in Spanish.
Yeah.
Right? Certain focus is on maybe the beginning of the sentence or the end of the sentence, right? How it's structured. So that's a key differentiator right there. Let me just see here. Paul Machine says some captive finance companies have new immigrant finance programs that will help qualified Latin people get their first loan within their current means. Most F&I managers don't take the time to educate their people, much less cater to that community of HB1 visa. And he also said before that, teaching people to identify the dialects may be a challenge. I agree, but it starts with knowing who they are first, and the data will reveal that.
Yeah, and I think, again, what I said earlier is perfection is the enemy of good.
Yeah.
You want to know that from a marketing perspective, but on a day-to-day, do you have to be perfect? No, you just have to treat people well. Does that make sense, Paul?
Totally. I tell people, don't focus on all the other BS that's not important. Focus on the customer experience, and that will translate into all of the other numbers falling into place. That's
the one of the best points of the night, because the dealer who works really well on giving that customer a really good experience, this is not a radical concept for it all.
Right.
Right? Because all I'm saying is have a good experience where you have some cultural sensitivity and it will pay dividends for you. Right? So those dealers that already get it, they're already set up in a good position right away.
You know what's interesting is to your point before, when you had the store in Florida where there's only a certain number within a 50-mile radius, yet people are driving 2-3 hours or more, okay, to come to that store because of that experience. Now, I happen to be a huge believer in that because we're the crazy people. We love to eat so much. I'm like within an inch of a 12-step program for food addiction. We'll drive 2 hours from Niantic, Connecticut to Arthur Avenue in the Bronx to have great Italian food. It's 2 hours one way. We spend another 2.5 hours to dine, enjoy, and then we drive back 2 hours. That's a huge commitment on time. We also own a retail yarn shop. Look, nobody needs yarn. Yet coming to our fall retreat, we've got people from California, Nebraska. They're getting on a plane to come to Connecticut to attend our retreat. And people come, they drive from Maine, from Vermont, New Hampshire, all over.
Here's what I would argue, is I would argue that what you're also doing is creating community, right? And the dealers that are really, really good at what they do in some ways also create community, right?
Yeah.
They promote their local community, and by promoting their local community, they create community. They're the vehicles for community. And that stuff is really powerful with people. That is incredibly powerful with people. It doesn't matter where you come from. We're all social creatures. We want that sense of belonging, connectiveness, and acceptance.
And building community might not necessarily be just putting, an advertisement on the back of Billy's sports jersey.
Yeah.
Right. It's not about, oh, here's a shirt, but come buy a car from us. It's more about here's how your team will look professional. Right. Here's how they'll feel better about themselves. It's about them, not us. We're not doing it for us. We're doing it for them. And as a result of that, that's when they buy into our vision. And that's when they'll send everybody they know from all corners of the earth to come to you for your products and services.
Yeah. Again, not rocket science. It's just treating people well.
Now, and then the other thing too, what was I going to say? So knowing which communities to communicate to them properly is the difference between using generic AI, which is very generic, and using a well-prompted AI, which is not so much coming up with generic BS as it is editing your thought process into a more deliverable form. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Actually, we do a lot of work with AI. So generic AI is almost intelligent. I mean, it's not as brilliant as people think. And a lot of times you have to use a concept known as adversarial AI, which is you have the core AI and you have other AI work to sort of educate that AI to do things the right way. Right. So for us, we have, if you look at we have some tools that we're rolling out right now where we can create content that's customized to the subculture. So, it's flavored to say Puerto Rican Spanish or stuff like that. So we can create using AI content on the fly. We can then translate that content right into Spanish that's flavored for the community. We can then convert that to audio, and then we can tie it into video. So we're putting together solutions that tend to extend what we're doing using AI, but if you understand the way we are, we're very cynical about AI. So whenever we do anything, we use these adversarial tools to make sure we are as human as possible. So for example, there are tools that you can use, there are methods that you can use to make sure you get a very high human rating on the content that you produce. Otherwise, if you just do it on the fly, Google will actually look at that content and judge whether or not it's AI or human created. There are ways to do it smartly so that when Google looks at it, and Google's the 800-pound gorilla in the room, is when it looks at it, it'll see what the content you created as human. So you bring AI into the question. We do use AI, but we use it in a very careful and controlled way to help our dealers be able to extend themselves better within the community.
And I think, Google's their reasoning for doing that is, don't they have their own product?
What are you cynical or something?
Oh, not me, Adam. Not me.
Well, they do, but part of it is also they have softened their approach a little bit because, well, a big part of Google's objective, which makes sense for any search engine, is relevance. What's the relevance for the audience? And so they've started realizing that, okay, if something was created by AI, but it's still very relevant and understandable to the audience, it's okay. So they have softened some of their algorithms to assess whether or not something is human generated or AI generated.
Okay.
But for us, just not to go off on a tangent, but you and I had a section talking about tools and tricks and stuff like that. One of the tools that we're rolling out is AI to help, because not all dealers have the infrastructure that's necessary that would help them really be able to extend themselves through the production of, say, Google Business Profile posts, Facebook posts, and stuff like that. So we can help them. And we always, whenever we produce anything, though, we always have a human editor that makes sure everything is good. But that would give them the ability to produce content on a regular basis to tell their story in a way that reflects their brand and reflects how they're trying to influence how they're perceived in the community.
Paul Machine says, I used to have my offices full of grandparents, sons, daughters, children, grandchildren, and cousins. Paul was a dealer before, by the way. Once one deal was done, someone else in the family would say to me, okay, I'm next. True story.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, he and I are pretty much like this in philosophy, very similar to you and I when it comes to doing business. But yeah, it really isn't rocket science. What other types of tools and tricks? Are there any others?
Well, yeah, I think here's something that's really simple. It's so simple, it's almost stupid. But say you have, say the majority of people in your area are of Mexican descent, right?
Yeah.
Well, if they have that heritage, they're going to know what bimbos are. So if you say a bimbo to an average American, what's a bimbo?
The bread company? No.
Okay. No. You're getting to it. So Bimbo actually is a company that produces snacks for people. If you're of Mexican origin, you know that they produce snacks and tasty little treats, right?
Yeah.
But if you're an average American, if I said this to a typical dealer, Bimbo would think it was some stereotype of a blonde woman, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of dealers have these little refreshment areas. So what happens if your refreshment area has some Bimbo snacks in it? That's an incredibly subtle thing.
Oh my God.
But it's important, right?
Nobody thinks of that.
Yeah.
Other than you.
That's, my wife would say it's because I'm slightly crazy, but that's another issue entirely. But no, it's subtle, but it's powerful because we do that all the time anyhow. The stuff that, all right, we're Americans. So in the refreshment area, there's almost always coffee. If we were British, the refreshment area would always be tea. And Earl Grey would be one of the teas that would have to be there.
Of course.
The things we assume in our areas because of our cultural background, we don't think about it. But then if we're saying we want to reach another culture, we got to think about what is assumed in their culture, right? So that's a teeny thing, but still hugely significant.
That's brilliant because it shows a support for a larger community. These are companies that they do business with, and again, you are as a dealer, you're supporting that same business. It's like paisan.
Yeah, and so but that gets to the second point. Like again, the tiniest thing is, what are the different restaurants in the area that cater to the community? What are the different bodegas in the community that cater to the community? Reach out to those places. Make your name visible in those places, right?
Yeah.
Go where the people are, right? That's always the thing is you go where the people are. And you don't do it in any heavy-handed, lopsided way. You do it the same way you would do it in any other environment where you're just saying, hey, I'm here. I want to sell to you. I respect you. You know, it's not, but those little things are huge. And that, in my view, what that does is that subtly builds on your reputation in a way that's so much more powerful than just dropping ads.
Oh,
right?
completely.
Yeah.
Wow, those are some real golden nuggets there, man. Because it's a part of a long-term strategy to really get to know an untapped community for the most part and become a part of that community.
Yeah. And go here. I'll take it one step further. Walk into your dealership tomorrow, stand on the floor, look around, and notice the artwork, right? Again, that artwork is an expression of your culture. Nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying anything. I'm a big white guy from New England, right? So I got nothing against my culture. I'm saying, though, that a subtle thing that you can do, and again, this isn't manipulative. This is a way of showing respect. If what you had is some artwork that is reflective of the culture you're targeting, when someone walks in, that's that subtle stuff that's picked up that has more power than sometimes what you say.
Incredible. Then again, these are things that we don't think about. We don't know what we don't know, and we base what we know on what we've experienced.
Yeah.
So yeah, these are powerful things that we could get started with literally tomorrow to just kind of become a part of that community.
Yeah. And that's what I love about what I do is I mean, I have a very spotted history. I used to do politics years ago, right? And
there's no politics show, man.
I'm not talking politics. I'm just saying I used to do it. And one of the things that I was very effective at it. And the reason is I used to go and organize different communities, right?
Yeah.
And I learned through doing that was a lot of the ideas that I'm sharing today is that if you come to understand the community, you can talk in a language that's reflective and respectful of the community, then you do much better than if you're just coming in there ham-fisted and saying, oh, listen to me. Blah. No, it don't work, right? So I learned that a long time ago when I was in politics is if you start with respect, it tends to go a long ways to you succeeding as opposed to any other method. So
that's good. Because we're used to in the ads that we do, we being the automotive community, they're all hammer ads for the most part.
Yeah.
Right. People jumping up on a soapbox and screaming the same message over and over in fast pitch, as opposed to painting the picture of what the benefit is.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
How can we help you first? And then the long game is they come around and they want to be part of whatever it is that we're doing.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
And that's what I love about these conversations, man. There's so many nuggets that I picked up in our conversation tonight that I never really thought about, because in all my years in automotive, I've not seen it in the dealerships for the most part. So it wasn't even a thing that I would have thought about. And I know for sure that most of the dealerships out there today, they're really in the same boat.
Well, I mean, I think the thing is we have a changing culture right now. Again, getting back to what Paul said earlier about the explosion when you're starting to look at 2030, 2040 and stuff like that. The population numbers, are going to be 30% of the U.S. population in general by 2050 will be Hispanic. But if you go into certain areas, like right now in Texas is almost, 47% thereabouts is Hispanic, right? So that means in parts of Texas, it's vast majority Hispanic. And you go to other parts of the country, you're seeing, there's huge dislocations in terms of population and everything in terms of what you would expect to see. Is that going to change the fabric of America? No, man. From my point of view, it just makes it richer. That's what's happened every time when you had new cultures matriculate into American society. it's made us richer, more powerful, more potent as a culture. And
No, I agree.
I think as dealers start to learn that, you know, getting again, Paul, I want to talk to you next week. You and I think a lot the same way, is that you're going to see Hispanic community will be one of the most powerful purchasing communities in the country by far. And you jump 10 years in the future, this conversation with a guy like me will be looked at like ancient history. I remember I got started in this industry when a website was a radical concept. And I look at this conversation we're having here today the same way. As for a lot of people, it's a new concept. But no, you jump 10 years in the future, it's going to be seen as normal.
For a lot of people, this will be the first time they've heard this.
Yeah, it might be so. So you can find me on LinkedIn, send me a message. I'd love to talk because I love the work that I do. I mean, it's a lot of fun.
All right, Paul Machine says, one challenge that I had to train my people on how to have a conversation with an immigrant who is attempting buying with someone else's ID, engaging an able buyer early and guiding them on how to buy the right way so that they earn credit in their given name and not use illegal means. This oftentimes leads to more investigative work to build a sellable portfolio to a lender, but the referrals afterwards were worth it.
Yeah. And that gets to my point about prepping your team. You got to think that stuff through. Now, mind you, in some areas, that's not going to be as big of an issue, simply because if it's a deeper multi-generational area, you're not going to run into that as much.
Yeah.
But in other areas, like, for example, after Hurricane Maria, there was a huge dislocation of Puerto Ricans into the United States. Now, Puerto Ricans are American citizens. At the same time, in some areas, they don't get treated that way, right? So,
I think most areas.
Yeah,
it's sad, but true.
Unfortunately, yeah. But the thing is it comes down to any dealer I've ever known that's really good trains their staff really well. It doesn't matter what you have to train them about. You just are good at training them to be able to handle the sale, run that sale through successfully, so it comes out the other end with a really happy customer. That's the distinguishing characteristics of really good dealers. The same applies here, and Paul's obviously pointed that out quite well.
You know, I'm somebody that I don't care what your background is. If you're a decent person, I'll be your friend. It's really that simple.
I have a rule that I've carried through life, and it's like in every group of people, there's a finite number of assholes. So avoid them at all costs, and don't let them upset you. Because the rest, the vast majority are good people. It doesn't matter who they are.
Man, the truer words have not been spoken. I mean, that hits the nail right on the head. So
what else you want me to touch on?
Man, I think we covered so much stuff. I'm even on overload with this. You know, I tell you what, if I owned a store, I would heed these words and I would have a conversation earlier than later, because just like anything else, you know, like in the EV space, for instance, everybody's like hands off on it for the most part. There are some leaders, but it's no different with this. Become that place that is revered by an entire community, and you'll be able to serve a whole new market that you never even thought about. And the resulting benefit is you're helping more people. And as a result of helping more people will then come and support you. And to your point, from hours and hours away, because people just want respect. It really boils down to that.
Yeah, listen, Paul, I've talked to dealers, and this is the sad side of what I do, where 30 or 40% of their market is actually of Hispanic origin, right? Which means 100% of their spending is going to 70% of the market. they're not flavoring. They get too caught up in their heads. Like, I don't need to market to that community in Spanish, or I don't need to do this. No, you idiot. And I'm sorry to put it that way. You're not thinking the right way. You would think, again, going back to Boston, bringing this full circle, it's the end of the conversation. If you're in Boston, you wouldn't think at all about flavoring things in a way that plays to people of Irish heritage. You wouldn't think at all. Do the same thing now for what's in your area, because you're wasting your money. You're dumping 100% of your budget, your advertising budget, into 70% of the market, when you could be smarter at segmenting your marketing message so that 100% of your budget is going to 100% of your opportunity. It's crazy.
I see that over and over again. Okay, you look at social media, for instance. There are different platforms that appeal to different demographics. And I'll see dealers crush it on TikTok, for instance.
Yep.
Millions of views. Well, that's great. But then I look at the demographic of the buyer, and the buyer is from 20.
That's not the person who's buying, yeah.
From 25 or 26 to 44, 25 to 44, let's say, is the demographic. All right. So let's look at the segments for a moment. 25 to 30 is the first segment. 30 to 35 is the second. 35 to 40 is the third, and 40 to 44 is the fourth segment. So the dealer's focusing all of their money on TikTok. You know what the average age is of the TikTok user?
Oh, it's somewhere down late teens, I think it is, or early 20s.
No, average is 30 across the board.
Really?
The average TikTok person
has gotten older.
Is 30 years old. So if the dealer is focusing most of their money, most of their ad spend on that person, that demographic, when their customers span from 25 to 44, it's no different than this. They're not spending money on an audience that's ripe for that messaging, because others aren't doing it.
Yeah, no, TikTok is an area today where it's got to mature a bit more for a lot of dealers. I mean, maybe if you're selling a Scion XP, then that would be a good group, because that's usually targeting young populations. But yeah, no, I hear exactly what you're saying. I totally agree.
Yeah, no, the opportunities are huge. So for anybody that's not connected with Adam, I tagged him in this post. So by all means, just click on his name and then send him a connection request. And same thing goes for me. If you're watching this and you and I are not connected, I'm always looking to connect with like-minded professionals in our business that can add value to each other. If I can help you, great. If you can help me, equally great. And if there's anyone that you feel would benefit from this, by all means, share the show. And to those that watch the show every week, thank you. To those that watch it on the replay, because a lot of people watch it on the replay, I thank you in advance for watching it. Any final words that you'd like to share with the audience, Adam?
It was a fantastic night. I had fun talking. As you can probably see by my reaction, I like what I do. So anybody want to talk? We're not a type of company that hard sells at all. I mean, we've had many dealers we talked to. We didn't even get them as customers. We gave them information and let them go on their way. Just like what we do. It's a very enjoyable field that we're in.
And after the show, I'm gonna send you Paul's contact info, and I'm gonna send Paul. Actually, I'll connect like a three-way message so that you guys can set something up to talk on your own afterwards.
Much appreciated. Thank you very much for the night, Paul.
So hold on when I log off, just stay on for a couple minutes. All right, I want to wish everybody a safe and successful next week, and we'll see you next week on Sunday Night Live. Thanks for watching.
All right, take care.